You may have heard stories of people losing tons of body fat using intermittent fasting and think that it's the next thing that you need to do in order to get the shape that you want. But is it right for you? That is the ultimate question. Stick around till later in the video because I'm going to be giving you the exact dieting approach that I took and the structure of my meals using intermittent fasting to drop over 10 kilos on one of my fat loss phases, and this has helped a lot of my clients as well. Intermittent fasting, when used as a fat loss tool, is typically applied in the 16-8 method, which simply means 16 hours of fasting and 8-hour window of eating. Most people will do this between 11 AM and 7 PM, 12 PM and 8 PM, something in this range of an 8-hour window, simply because in my experience and in most people's experiences, skipping breakfast is probably the easiest meal to skip in the day, and this is just because you're probably in a rush to get to work. It's easier to have water and caffeine in the morning, get through your morning, power on with work, and then think about bigger meals later in the day. Whereas, I don't know about you, but I do not like the idea of going to bed hungry and skipping dinner. Not for me, Clive, not the one. Why does intermittent fasting work for fat loss then? Well, it's simply a case of shortening your opportunity to eat. There's no magic associated with this. In order to lose belly fat, you need to create a calorie deficit, which simply means burning more calories than you are consuming. So if this is the number of calories that you are burning through walking about day to day, steps, cardio, going to the gym, and this is the number of calories you are consuming through liquid and food, this needs to be lower than this in order to strip off belly fat. If you are using intermittent fasting and eating in an 8-hour window, but your calories are above the number of calories you're burning, you're not in a calorie deficit, you're in a calorie surplus, and you'll still gain weight. So it's still possible to gain weight using intermittent fasting. But for most people, what they'll find is by shortening their eating window, this means that there's naturally less opportunity to eat as many calories, maybe reduces your snacking, and therefore you create a calorie deficit to lose fat. The harsh truth around this is that people are usually searching online for all the answers before actually getting stuck in themselves and just doing it through trial and error. The only way you're going to learn about the best approach to fat loss is by actually just doing it, put it into practice. So once you've got an approach to dieting, give it a go, jump into intermittent fasting. The reality is that you are going to be a bit hungry at the start. You're going to be maybe a bit tired in the morning and get some hunger cravings. But what will happen is if you fill yourself up with loads of water, loads of fluids, have some caffeine to suppress your appetite a little bit, then your body will adjust to that later eating time and you can basically push out that first meal of the day. When I was doing a very successful cut using intermittent fasting, the approach I took was I would train first thing in the morning, have some caffeine and water. I found my workouts were still pretty solid, and I personally prefer training in the morning anyway. And then when I would break my fast would be later in that morning. I'd try and delay my first meal until about 10 or 11 AM. I would have 2 scoops of whey protein and some fruit, and just try and fill up as much as I could before lunchtime. And I found that I could probably get through to about 1 to 2 PM using this approach before having my first big meal of the day. In the afternoons, I would then have 2 huge meals. Now, when I'm talking huge meals, I'm talking massive volume of food. So think about massive chicken salads or a chicken stir fry with tons of veg. And maybe as a dessert, I would have a Greek yogurt protein bowl, which may be protein powder with 0% fat Greek yogurt and some fruit to pad it out. These are super high volume meals, and what you want to think about to make fat loss as easy as you can is maximizing the volume of food for the number of calories that you've got. So if you've only got 2,000 calories to play with, you want to maximize that, and you're not going to do that having 6 croissants, I'm afraid, right? If you think about how much food you get for 6 croissants, I could eat 6 croissants and then be hungry again in probably an hour or 2. Some of the most filling foods would be things like potatoes, which have one of the highest satieties of foods, oats, protein, loads of fruit and veg in your meals. Drinking loads of water is going to keep you full as well, and just going for these foods that are super filling and maximize the calories that you have available. So comparing 1,000 calories of pasta, your portion is going to be that. If you get 1,000 calories of potato, it's going to be like that. You're going to get a huge amount of food to play with, and that's going to keep you a lot more full. So some of these simple food swaps can make a massive difference. Fasting can also be a good approach if you really don't want to track calories. So if you're starting a fat loss phase and you decide, I don't want to track calories, I want to take more of an intuitive approach, I would definitely recommend shortening your eating window or going into an intermittent fasting phase, because if you don't know how many calories you're consuming, it's quite hard to gauge if you're in a deficit and to continue making progress over time. So shortening that eating window gives you an opportunity to naturally reduce your portion sizes and the total amount of calories that you are consuming without having to go into the nitty-gritty of tracking calories. And I've seen friends and clients of mine make great progress using intermittent fasting in this way. You may then get to a point where you hit a plateau because you're not quite sure of how many calories you're burning. As your body weight comes down, you're going to start burning less calories per day, and therefore it may be a good idea at that point to then start tracking calories. But if you really don't want to, start with intermittent fasting. Now, it's an important reminder for you is that there is no one approach that is perfect, and I can give you all the advice in the world, but the only way you're going to know what works for you is putting it into practice and, you know, spending less time basically researching the best approach, picking some protein-based meals as a starting point, going into intermittent fasting, seeing if you can stick to it. If it works for you, great. If it doesn't, just change it. It's not the end of the world, right? So just switch to smaller meals more regularly. You'll find that sweet spot eventually where the number of meals keeps you full across the day, hunger and cravings are reducing. That is where you are finding the sweet spot to stick to your diet over the long term. And reminder that you don't need to eat 100% clean, because if you try and do this, you are probably not going to stick to your diet in the long term. So regardless of what approach you would take, whether it be tracking calories, intermittent fasting, or multiple small meals across the day, just use trial and error, figure out what works and go from there. I hope you found this video useful. If you did, hit like and subscribe to the channel for more simple fat loss and muscle building tips. I'll see you very soon. Cheers.